and then it shall be free.
What's up, everybody? It's Young here with a Metal Gear Solid 5 news update. The following information comes from the Phantom Pain cover article featured in the August 2015 edition of Jeux Video magazine, a popular French gaming news outlet, as well as some information that the article's editor provided to me when I contacted him. If you can speak French, then you should definitely subscribe to their magazines, which you can do so by going to jeuxvideomagazine.com. They do very professional and well-presented news coverage. And before I begin, I would like to thank Alex Sasso and Venom Robin for helping me with the French translation. In the cover article, the editor, Arnaud de Keyser, detailed both the many positive aspects of the game as well as some of his concerns in the 30 or so missions he played throughout 5 days. Locations he got to visit during his play session include Afghanistan and the lush forests of Angola and Zambia. The two African countries are one location, by the way. When I contacted Arnaud to elaborate, he clarified that the African location takes place on the border of Angola and Zambia. Now, this does conflict with what other articles have said, which is that the African location is the border of Angola and Zaire, the latter of which became known as the Republic of Congo in 1997. When I asked Arnaud about this, he said he'd have to check again when he reviews the game, but he did notice that both Zambia and Zaire share borders with Angola. I personally think that Arnaud might have confused Zambia with Zaire, since all other articles I've read consistently mentioned the latter. Regardless of which border, clear confirmation was given to me that Africa is one region. Within the regions he visited, he got to infiltrate everything from military bases, petrochemical plants, to diamond mines, all of which he found to have a lot of variety in terms of layout, making every level feel like a different experience every time. He also talked about the game's various gameplay mechanics, but he conveyed the same things as other outlets who attended the MGS5 preview event, so I'll be skipping over that. If you need a refresher, check out my MGS5 preview compilation video. Moving forward, this video will focus on the editor's honest thoughts and opinions of the game after his limited play session. He began by stating that, with a game like Phantom Pain, 5 days of straight gameplay really wasn't all that much considering that the game features a real open world, tons of missions and side missions, weapons and gadgets to unlock, and a full mother base to manage, which in itself was described to be a game within a game. He also pointed out that the game looks and plays a lot like Peace Walker, offering a mix of action and management as well as a generous amount of content, maybe too much. The topic eventually shifted to various aspects of Mother Base. As most of you may know by now, one of Mother Base's main functions is to research and develop new items, gadgets, weapons, equipment, and gear for Snake to use in the battlefield. Now, something that Arnaud had a problem with was the pace at which certain types of weapons unlocked. From what he played, all of the weapons he unlocked towards the beginning of the game up to Mission 15 were lethal weapons, and he seldom found himself using any of them because soldiers have to be spared and taken down non-lethally to be recruited. Lethal weapons were simply useless for developing Mother Base. It was only after enough soldiers were recruited and Mother Base reached a relatively high level that new and useful non-lethal weapons and gadgets like the tranquilizer sniper rifle, decoys, and various electric weapons began to unlock. But to develop Mother Base up to that point, for a long 15 missions, he was forced to rely on very limited non-lethal options that only consisted of the tranquilizer gun and CQC, with an arsenal of lethal weapons that pretty much collected dust for most of that time, as they served little purpose in the recruitment of new soldiers and the leveling of Mother Base. In that sense, Arnaud elaborated when I contacted him that he felt as though there was something broken about this mechanic. As a result, he found that there was a big emphasis on other activities that could help Mother Base level up quicker, such as playing a lot of side missions, finding and recruiting high-level soldiers, and harvesting specific resources like minerals, plants, and herbs. Now, something that he had not anticipated was just how important of a role Mother Base would play in the game's progression. Due to his limited time, Arnaud hadn't invested too much time into Mother Base, but he eventually came to learn that Mother Base management becomes more and more important the further he progressed through the game. Unfortunately for him, he realized this a little too late, so there came a point during his gameplay session in which he got stuck in certain missions because he hadn't unlocked the proper gear. He pointed out that when this happens, players may find themselves having to shift focus away from missions and towards recruiting soldiers, as well as assigning them to their appropriate units to level up Mother Base until level requirements are met to unlock the required gear, or they may have to use certain workarounds to achieve a similar effect, such as manually assigning a bulk of soldiers to a specific unit just to unlock the required gear, and then reassigning them back to their original arrangement. This is why he highly recommended that players don't ignore the Mother Base aspect of the game, since otherwise they may find themselves lacking the proper equipment and having a much harder time or getting stuck in later missions. The topic then shifted to the game's narrative, which he also had mixed feelings about. While Phantom Pain features a huge amount of missions and objectives, Arnaud found that as a result, the story felt much more diluted. From what he saw, not all of the missions progressed the story by much, at least in a clear or significant way, and he expressed having found himself lost in some uninteresting subplots. When I contacted Arnaud and asked him to elaborate further, he stated that Phantom Pain starts really slowly, and that after having played 30 missions, he still didn't have much of a clue on what was going on in the game scenario. He did add, however, that this may all have to do with the fact that he hadn't finished the game, and that if the game leads up to a great ending, he might forget about the slower narrative. Another narrative aspect that received criticism were briefings and debriefings for missions, which were described to be quite plain, consisting of a basic static screen with Kaz's voice explaining the context of the mission, and once missions began, Arnaud found himself quickly forgetting why he was taken to the battlefield in the first place and just focused on the task at hand. Fortunately, on occasions, there would be impromptu moments during missions in which certain story elements would develop that were far more interesting than the briefings. Most of the story development in Phantom Pain will occur through cutscenes, but it was noted that they are very few and far between. Whereas MGS4 had too many cutscenes in Arnaud's opinion, he found MGS5 to be the complete opposite, and he's worried that the limited number of dialogue and key characters may throw off some fans. Fortunately, the cutscenes themselves were given high praise. They may not play often, but the ones that are there were said to be spectacular and enigmatic. Rather than gradually lifting the veil on the plot, the cutscenes served to thicken the mystery with their supernatural elements, controversial topics like child soldiers, and shocking sequences that had a lot of impact, and these cutscenes kept him coming back and wanting to know more. There was also talk about the cinematography and staging within these cutscenes, which were said to be more sleek than any previous Metal Gear Solid game, featuring epic and unforgettable moments. The atmosphere of the overall game was also said to be really immersive, with tension constantly lurking in the air, and Arnaud went as far as to say that sometimes MGS5 isn't far from a horror game. At the same time, players can expect to find the typical Metal Gear humor scattered about, with the example he gave being the sound of screaming soldiers as they are launched in the air via Fulton. The article concluded with a statement that it was hard to form an opinion on MGS5 even after having played 30 missions, as he felt as though the game hadn't revealed all of its secrets on both the story and gameplay front in the time he had to play with it. Furthermore, he didn't have much time to fully dive into Mother Base management, which becomes really important in later stages of the game due to special events that need to be dealt with. However, he did say with certainty that gameplay was much smoother than before, and that the atmosphere was very convincing, stating that players will truly feel like they are infiltrating enemy camps at their own risk. At the same time, he did feel as though certain gameplay elements were tedious, like the long distances he had to travel through the open world with not much to do during the trip. He also complained that the game's fast travel system wasn't very well explained. To close off the article, he simply stated that players who take their time to learn and master every aspect of gameplay will probably find that there is a lot to discover in MGS5. So there you have it, folks, Jeux Video Magazine's take on Phantom Pain. Before you start freaking out and getting bad premonitions about the game, keep in mind that these impressions are one man's opinions, which were based on a limited play session of the game. Not to say that his concerns aren't valid, but he does state multiple times that 5 days and 30 missions wasn't enough to formulate a definitive opinion on the game due to its sheer scale. The bottom line is that in Arnaud's opinion, gameplay felt great, levels were varied, the cutscenes were awesome, and the content of those cutscenes and the mysteries of the story kept him coming back for more. But at the same time, the story progressed too slowly for his liking. He felt as though some of the more useful tools in Phantom Pain took too long to unlock, thereby inhibiting his ability to develop Mother Base to a point in which he wouldn't get stuck in certain missions, and sometimes traveling from point A to point B with little to do in between would get boring. I think the article provided some great insight, but I'll wait until Arnaud and other members of the press have spent all the time they need with the game and finished it all the way through before I start drawing conclusions. But at the same time, I'll definitely keep some of these concerns in mind. What are your thoughts on the information and opinions provided by Jeux Video magazine's article? Be sure to let us know in the comments below, and to be further updated on Metal Gear Solid 5, stay tuned right here on Yong Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Yong out.